Hello and welcome to Outer Limits of InnerScience, where we explore human transformation, consciousness, and the science of meditation in order to empower people to heal and thrive. Hello, my name is Andrew Wright with InnerScience Research Fund, and with me as always, Dr. Hillari Hamilton.
Hey, Andrew, it's so nice to be here, and welcome everybody. This is going to be an amazing episode.
It's one that's particularly dear to my heart because it gets right into the meat of everything that we are so passionate about.
Yeah, and it's so cool because our guest talks about how when he was young, he had a pretty cool experience which led him to researching all of this stuff. Did you have anything like that when you were young, Andrew?
I did. There was actually something. I was 14 years old when I kind of started on my journey that led me to where I am today, which is crazy. And I went to a camp, I think it still exists today, called Super Camp. And we were taught how to go and mental rehearse things, but we were basically taught self-hypnosis and out of body. And so I started having mystical experiences at the age of 14. Little did I know that it was going to lead me to where I am today, but I can see the pattern.
It's so cool. This is exactly me too. When I was a kid, I had experiences with beings in my room, and I hung out with the fairies in the forest in the back of my house. And, my mom was, okay with me doing that. But I'm so glad that we get to study the supernatural. And that's what our guest is all about, is looking at what consciousness is. And where is consciousness? Is it in the body? Is it in a field? Is it in your cells? It's so cool that science really wants to look at what consciousness is all about. And that's what we're ready to dive into.
Absolutely. Very exciting. In fact, the organization, he's the president of the organization that is something that we're funding. We're funding one of their studies, and it's called IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences. I'm sure many of you have heard of IONS before. In fact, the Institute has actually been in several of Dan Brown's books, right?
That's right. That's right. And I love that IONS has been around for, since the early 1970s. And it all started because of Edgar Mitchell, who was an astronaut, was in outer space looking back at the planet Earth and wanting to know what consciousness was all about. I guess how small the planet was, but, we don't have that perspective. And an astronaut does have that perspective. So I'm glad it's all getting tied together, and we're looking at consciousness and research and meditation and all of it coming together.
Yep. And besides Edgar Mitchell, there was also Dean Radin. I'm sure many of you have heard his name before. So they do a lot of psi research. They're doing meditation research, which is what InnerScience is helping fund. This particular study is on meditation and 4 different modalities, 4 different types of meditations, and kind of comparing them, but really going deep into what they call citizen science, which is people from around the world participating just because they want to, rather than being recruited, but they're able to get much larger numbers, just like Dr. Joe Dispenza does at his events with his company Metamorphosis and UC San Diego, bringing people that are part of an organization, part of a retreat, and studying a whole lot of them all at once. And it's amazing to see how science is kind of changing and moving in this new direction.
Yeah, it's carving a new path, right? And it seems like the world is ready for this. And IONS being around for so many years, I would love to look back and see how hard it was for them to get funding back in the day, where now people really want to know this stuff. They really believe and understand because they've had experiences, they've had mystical moments. And like our guest had a mystical moment when he was young. So you end up where we are today because of how we were as children. And I'm so excited to see where all this is going.
All of this kind of research is exactly what InnerScience is doing, Dr. Joe Dispenza and UC San Diego is doing, and of course, IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And I'm really excited that our guest today, Dr. Thomas Brophy, is actually the president of IONS, and we're going to be talking about things like meditation, citizen science, the observer effect, all sorts of cool things. But tell me, Dr. Hillari, how did you guys meet? How'd you meet Thomas?
Well, just as chance might have it, he was at a literary book experience here in Coronado, where I live, and he was one of the guest speakers. And I just hit it off with him. We just started talking, and then I found out, Andrew, that InnerScience funded one of his projects at IONS. And we just had a great conversation about so many things that we cover in our podcast that's coming up. And I just fell in love with him. He's a great guy. He's doing a lot of cool things with ions, and he's changing a lot of things through the scientific studies that they're doing over there. And I just thought, boy, if we're funding one of his projects, then he should be on one of our podcasts.
Absolutely. Let's dive into it. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time. I know our catalysts are very interested in the work that we fund, but also it's just such a great moment to get to meet you. And tell me, just learning a little bit more about you and doing some research, how did you get into this field? Like, as a kid, were you in high school going, I want to study consciousness? Like, how did you get to where we are today?
Actually, in my case, yes, as a kid or before high school, before high school. So I had anomalous experiences, and so this brief story is actually published in a book a couple years ago. Came out by Paul Mills with a foreword by Deepak Chopra, where Paul, who's a scientist, he interviewed about 20 scientists about their spiritual lives and mystical experiences and backgrounds. And so what I told there is what I'm going to tell here is that as a kid, I had anomalous consciousness experiences, that were real, my actual experiences of reality, but I knew that the culture around me had the view that those kind of experiences can't be real because science says they can't happen. And so that's the origin of my interest, and that's why I went into science in the first place, to answer those questions about the nature of reality and my own experiences that I had as a kid. So then in high school, I read Alan Watts. He was one of my first The Way of Zen introductions, and I started to study and practice multiple esoteric meditation practices and traditions. And simultaneously, while I was pursuing an education in physics, and so like my undergraduate degree, I had almost a minor in, they didn't have formal minors at Colorado College, but in Eastern philosophy and a major in physics, and then just continued that as a side interest all the way through the formal academic training in physics, and then my early scientific research with the NASA Voyager project. So that's it in a nutshell of how I got here.
And how did you bridge the gap between working with NASA to now being with Noetic Sciences?
Yes, so because I always had that dual interest, and frankly, during graduate school, the dual interest did become kind of divergent because it's hard to really maintain strong activity in both at the same time. And then I brought them back together with as a postdoc. I In my postdoctoral time, I drafted what became my first book, published several years later, called "The Mechanism, Demands, and Mysticism." And in the context of drafting that book, uh, which I started doing when I was an exchange scientist at the University of Tokyo in Japan,
Mhm.
and in my spare times practicing Zen in the Zen temple in Japan. And I contacted about the side book project a yogi and scientist named Hiroshi Motoyama, and because I read an interview with him where he was talking about his approach to integrating science and spirit, which was very much along the lines of what I was trying to do in the book I was drafting. So I developed a relationship with him, and he invited me to a kind of special fellowship while I was simultaneously working in industry in the United States after completing my uh, postdoctoral research stint for 2 years at the University of Tokyo. And then, so he invited me back to a 2-month stay at his institute. I was able to take a sabbatical from my corporate job. And then he invited me back to a job in the US as Dean of the California Institute for Human Science. And the California Institute for Human Science was a startup little university founded by Motoyama. And uh, so that was the really way that I started bringing them back together. So he wanted to bring to the CIHS University people like me, physicists who also had an interest and strong interest in practice of meditations and interest in the spiritual and the mystical and bringing them together with the scientific. So that was a great opportunity. And then eventually I became president of CIHS. And while I was president, we got CIHS accredited by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges as a unique mind, body, spirit university. And so really a kind of unique kind of accreditation. It's tough to get accreditation, but we managed to by taking this integrative approach. And then I was invited to join IONS.
I have to go back and not skip over something that you talked about. And you said something that happened to you as a child that you knew was not common or unusual. Can you tell us about what happened to
Yeah,
you?
let's go back to basics there.
Sure. And I mentioned this in that book, The Spiritual Lives of Scientists. And so I had, as a kid, anomalous experiences, anomalous cognitive experiences, like moments of knowing things beyond the ordinary local senses way of knowing things. And in some instances, not I wasn't like clairvoyant or anything like that, but I just had moments of knowing it, and often enough that I was able to notice that I was having these moments that were not ordinary experience, and some of them were verifiable. So, like in simple things like playing a game with family members, and just a momentary hit, like, okay, something tell me if I tell my dad to pick a random card, I'm gonna know what it is this time, and I do, and I did, and but they were just spontaneous, momentary experiences. They weren't something I could do. I said, okay, I couldn't say like, okay, now I'm gonna know what that is or what that is, but just spontaneous happenings that would happen. So I wanted to understand how they happened.
That's amazing. And I have to say, I had similar experiences as a child, and I've only recently been remembering some of those things that I used to do. And I was like, how did I know that? And how did I lose that? But apparently that's what happens. We grow up, and I'm just wondering if that interest that you have you fostered that at all? Is that, or I'm sure you know that there are people who teach those kinds of things. China's Super Psychics was a book about what China did with people like that.
Well, so there's kind of a dual track answer to that. Um, First, so the two tracks would be practice. Are you practicing that? Are you developing that practice, basically, of magic? And are you continuing that study of trying to understand how it works? So definitely my whole career is that second part, continuing the study of trying to understand how it works. As far as developing myself as a magician, you would call it, uh, uh, that when I so I had these experiences when I was a kid, and so basically as soon as I was old enough to go to a bookstore and buy my own books, the books I bought were about magic, how to do magic, and I would read them and actually try the practices, and but they usually didn't work, and so that was kind of the end of my esoteric magician career as an actual practicing magician. But as far as trying to understand what is going on when, well, like you said, Andrew, we all tend to have these kind of experiences, especially when we're kids. What's trying to understand that has been my whole career.
Yeah, what I think is fascinating too is because people that are drawn to this work have had those experiences when they're children, and we want to know the nature of reality. We want to expand the awareness of what's real, what's not real, what's matter, what's energy. And that's exactly what you're studying. And I know you worked with Robert Duvall too in the past, and just your um, aware of consciousness on a different level than most people. And the fact that you're the president of IONS is so exciting because I'm sure you think way outside of the box.
I try, yeah, I try to, and yeah, you mentioned Robert Duvall. So I did two books with Robert Duvall about the prehistoric monuments of ancient Egypt, and that was a really wonderful set of projects in my research career about the archaeoastronomical meanings of especially a site called Nabta in southern Egypt, which predated the dynastic Egyptian civilization, and we found very interesting things there, and was able to travel there on a couple of occasions, and that region of the very remote Sahara Desert. So that's what.
And what did you discover? I mean, what did you find when you were in those areas that that helped lead you to where you are today?
So I was really intrigued by the announcement of the findings at Nabta Playa, this site, because CNN announced it as like the on TV as news as the Stonehenge of the Sahara, and there was a paper published in Nature magazine, a scientific research paper about it, and a archaeological scientific report. And I was interested in that because of the era, the pre-dynastic Egyptian region, and I was aware of like Robert Schoch's dating of the Sphinx because of the geophysical erosion and how it indication that it's much older. And so I studied that data when it came out and was announced, and found some discrepancies in the published data of the alignment of the stones, ancient stones at Nabta Playa with the stars. And because in my PhD work, I had happened to do some astrophysical dynamical calculations, I knew how to calculate the precise alignment of stars and that kind of thing. So I tested those calculations and found some differences from the publication of the scientists. And so I did my own calculations and approached it as a puzzle, and found evidence of possibly advanced knowledge of astronomy encoded in those megalithic stones, and actually a smaller stone calendar circle, it's called, at the site. So and then Robert Duvall contacted me because he was excited about that, and that's why we ended up doing two research-based books, popular books about it. Uh, that are still out there, and I did one small book on my own called The Origin Map first.
Amazing.
That project got a lot of interest, because so just studied it as a astrophysicist, that site, as a puzzle. Okay, what are these stones aligned to astronomically? What's their meaning? Oh, wow, it looks like they had some kind of advanced knowledge of the precession of equinoxes, and maybe even the location of the center of the galaxy, which is sort of a visual object in the sky, but not really visual very much. And then I asked the question, and openly in the book asked the question, okay, if they did have this kind of knowledge, how did they get it? How did they get it?
Yeah,
That
right.
knowledge. Where did it come from? And some sort of consciousness means that's not purely physical, not purely physical, is one of the ways that those that knowledge might have been gotten, which I speculate about in the book. So that's the connection to consciousness there.
Do you
And then,
mean when you say that, do you mean that there's all sorts of different names for it, but let's say it's the Akashic record or the mind of God or all the information that's available to us in the field, that information was somehow downloaded or received?
yeah, or remote viewing.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah,
What do you mean
and
by that remote viewing?
there's like there's a story. Okay, as a story that there is a story about the moon landings, and one of the big radar arrays that gets the signals from spacecraft is based in Australia, and there's a story about some workers there at the time of the moon landings uh, telling Aboriginal people, and this actually also happened with the Kogi people. Anyhow, telling Aboriginal people about the humans landing on the moon, and them saying, "Yeah, we were there too." And it's like they were there in their consciousness, they thought, and so they lots of indigenous cultures purport that they have ways of gaining knowledge of the universe beyond the physical. So that kind of remote viewing. And we call it remote viewing now in modern parlance.
Sure, sure. So is the Institute of Noetic Sciences studying? I mean, I remember, like I said, from years ago, hearing about Dean Radin just doing all sorts of amazing studies, and they at the time for me seemed just so cool, but for the rest of the world, maybe way out there. Is that still really the focus? I mean, the study that we're funding is about meditation and trying to show these four different modalities. Maybe one is more effective than another. Um, to me, meditation now is so broadly, widely accepted that doesn't sound like a study that's really out there. Is what is ION's main focus now, or where do you see it going?
So we at IONS, we completed a 6-month strategic planning process recently. And one of the outcomes of that is that a new strategic pillar that we are including in ION's focus now and going forward is about developing and identifying ontological theoretical foundations for understanding how psi phenomenon happens and how consciousness happens in the world, and how we can bring consciousness, how to bring consciousness into our scientific models of how reality works. Because, like you mentioned, for decades, IONS has really been a leader in laboratory research in psi phenomena, and not only IONS, the whole field of parapsychology has gotten and published many statistically significant results, but the whole field is of psi research and psi phenomenon is still stigmatized. And the reason is because the scientific community doesn't have an ontological foundation. It just means a theoretical foundation in which to understand how they can work. They're still so prevalent in the scientific community, the view that, well, who cares if you get psi experimental research data that's statistically significant? It just can't be true. And so for me, that's like my experience as a kid, where these experiences were real to me,
Mhm.
but the culture around me was saying, not directly, but I could sense the culture around me feeling those experiences can't be real because they just can't happen. And so we still have that kind of situation operating in the scientific and academic communities now. And so this new strategic pillar that we're including, we're still doing the experimental the experimental empirical project, psi research is still a core foundation of what IONS does scientifically, but we are putting also additional focus on the ontological foundations, the theoretical foundations, so that we can bridge this gap and remove the stigma that still operates in the rest of the scientific community. And you mentioned Dean's book. I want to give a plug for his forthcoming book. Dean Radin, he's still chief scientist at IONS, our wonderful chief scientist, and I have on my desk here a advanced uncorrected proof of his forthcoming book in October that he titled "The Science of Magic." So it's a really exciting book.
I cannot wait to read that. I mean, that is right up our alley, especially because it's magic now because we don't understand it. We can't explain it. We can't use our traditional scientific tools to be able to measure and explain it. I mean, we barely understand gravity, let alone consciousness.
Yeah, yeah, and we don't have the tools and the experimental empirical methods, but we also don't have the ontological theoretical foundation. And that's the new pillar that we're focusing on, as well as the empirical experimental at IONS now.
Yeah. It's so exciting because I think people are ready for this information. It just seems like what's happening on like Joe Rogan and all these other big podcasts, people are drawn to this non-physical reality that we can put our attention on. And we're proving through Dr. Joe's work how powerful we truly are and how biology is changing, physiology is changing in just 1 week when they spend 30 hours in a meditative state. I mean, they're becoming someone else. And what you're doing and what HeartMath is doing, it seems like, you know, there's an opening that's going on and the world wants to know more. And I think it's the next evolution in what's going to happen with humanity.
Yeah, we're uncovering the truth, I think, and making that available to people because they forgot what they've always known.
Yes, yeah, and part of our at IONS this effort to build and identify the ontological theoretical foundations uh, is that we are set up to be able to do that at a high level. So like we're co-sponsoring, and my friend Anita Goel at Harvard and I put together a conference that's the summit meeting that's not announced yet. It's going to be announced soon, like this week, at MIT and Harvard of very elite scientists and leaders in the field and in the industry and even a little bit in government. Which the summit is called the Fifth Industrial Revolution Nanobiosym Global Summit 2.0. And Anita's done a really good job of putting together this in a way that it's able to start to bridge the gap, start to remove the stigma, because a lot of these kind of elite scientists who are going to be there, they still are affected by that kind of stigma against psi research. But this kind of effort that is bringing them together with these ideas and contextualizing it in new ways, we think can be a big important step forward. And Anita just let me know that Joe Dispenza apparently is going to be there too. And so that's wonderful.
I know our audience is very interested in all of this stuff because it's really it speaks to them ultimately that we're learning how powerful we truly are. And that's a message that everybody needs to hear. That's one of the first things we hear at an event. When somebody first comes to an event, they like come up to us almost angry. Why doesn't everybody know this? Like, well, we're doing our best, and we're trying to prove it scientifically also, because that's how we change the model of healthcare. That's how you change medicine. It's got to be evidence-based medicine. So we need the science to be able to prove that our thoughts are really that powerful.
Yeah. And like how we empower people with this work. We give the power back to the individual to let them know that the power is within them. It's always been there. And I'm sure that's what's happening with ions. Like, what kind of projects are you doing that you're most excited about?
Well, we have the one that InnerScience funded, and that is going well. That's the Citizen Science Project, and that we're calling it. And we also have a new set of experiments that Dean is doing about mind affecting matter, and uh, that work is exciting and moving forward as well. And we just defined like a whole list. I think there we had to cut the list down from like 30 to 20 and then 15 projects that we want to do that will really move this theoretical foundation effort forward, and also move the empirical science, empirical experimental research front forward at the same time. And there's another project that we're in the final stages of that Arno Delorme's involved with, uh, and that has to do with it. It's a follow-up to, you've probably heard of Bill Bengtson's work on healing mice, and it's a sophisticated follow-up to that that involves the MD Anderson Cancer Center, a really front, high-level, top-tier cancer center. Um, so we have experiments going on a number of fronts that we're very excited about.
That Bankston study, I think, has really influenced me because we do a lot of at the Dr. Joe retreats. He does and teaches healing techniques, and we do something called coherence healings on large groups of people. And sometimes we have remote healers that also tune into the room and participate. But the Bankston study I thought was so interesting because one of the things that really stood out to me was it wasn't the number of healers, it was the number of healees that was really significant. And I thought that really kind of puts a twist on things that I have a hard time reconciling. But there have been events where Dr. Joe has said, okay, everybody at this event, we're all going to receive a healing. And I just would be so curious to see what the rates, the values, the healing, or the measurement of the energy of the room, those kinds of things, how that changes. So it'd be really fascinating to see a follow-up on that study.
Absolutely. Yes, it's very exciting work. And Bill Bengtsson himself was very down to earth in his approach. And he was one of those rare kinds of scientists who could identify, oh, there's something really amazing going on here, and not get caught up in the thinking along the lines of, well, but that just can't happen because that kind of thing. So he's just open to investigating, and I think maintained the perspective that we don't know how it works, but it does work. Let's just keep looking at it and measuring it and assessing it, and then eventually figure out how it works, but not worry about that right now.
And I know I can speak on behalf of a lot of our donors who have, they're supporting the science and they believe in the science and the research is so important. And yet they are an N of one. If you're the person who's healed or if you're the person who's changed, it doesn't really matter. Like the effect is real for you and you changed. Was it the placebo? Was it you? Was it consciousness, quantum field? We don't know, but the fact is your cancer is gone, and the fact is you're able to walk now. So that makes it really profound. But people really, our donors want to see the science and want to be able to prove it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to control for the observer effect too, right?
Yes. Yeah. Um, so yeah, and like we also were contacted by a group that's funded by a government funding organization uh, that is studying cold fusion, and it's a serious project. And so they contacted Dean at Ions, and they contacted Ions because they were astonished to find that they seem to be finding that their state of consciousness of the researchers has some
Yes.
effect on the output of the reaction. And so uh, that kind of thing can really change the scientific paradigm
Yes.
when those little outliers are really paid attention to. That's how scientific paradigms change,
Yeah.
uh, rather than sweeping them under the rug. And if you look at then the whole field of cold fusion research, or room temperature fusion research, since it began to several decades ago, it's kind of separated. It's its own field because a lot of the scientific community just doesn't believe it, and so it's kind of its own thing. But it does have some government funding now, and uh, this insight, this research group, may be showing that all along it was one big kind of sci research project, and that they didn't realize that until now. That's why it was so unrepeatable in some cases, but repeatable in other cases, and it wasn't known why.
Yeah, it's interesting because we were just at an event in Washington, D.C., and one of the participants came up to me after a meditation and she said, I had the strangest experience just happened to me. Consciousness said that it wants to be discovered, it wants to be studied, but the researchers need to be in that right state of mind for consciousness to come through and be studied, which I thought was fascinating. That observer effect matters. It matters. If you're not coherent and you're studying something, it's not going to come through all the way. So when she said that to me, she felt that that was a very strange thing to tell me, but it made so much sense to me. I had a conversation with Andrew about it, and it's like the scientists need to be in a correct state in order to observe their findings. It
Yeah,
should be that way.
uh,
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
observer effect is enormous, and in many different ways. And Dean, uh, who's been studying that for a long time, I'm going to give another plug for his book. He gives a really great discussion about that, and it's once you realize the importance of the observer effect, um, you find that it's definitely a rabbit hole, and uh, uh, the first initial thought about, oh, okay, well, we just have to get all the experimenters coherent, and then it will work better. That doesn't always work either. So there's something really profound and complicated and new beyond our ordinary ways of thinking about how things work that's going on there.
I'm actually currently reading Ellen Langer's book, The Mindful Body, and she talks about all these different studies that she's done having to do with mindfulness being a contagion. Like that it's actually, so they take a group of researchers and they get them mindful and then they leave the room and bring in the study subjects. And based on the mindfulness of the room, the study subjects will do better on tests, will be more coherent because there's this residue left behind. So imagine this researchers participating in our research and anybody's research, especially when it comes to consciousness, what the effect is of their attitudes and their beliefs and their perceptions around what they're doing. And the reason this actually came up recently, and the reason Hillary and I were talking about, is because we recently had somebody, a researcher who's interested in receiving more funding, who said they want to do something with animals. And it involved, I don't know, I don't want to say lower forms, but worms, um, not mammals, but worms. And it involved having to kill them and grind them up and dissect them and figure it out. And it raised this question of whether or not you can study consciousness while taking a life. If that act, if that intention alone could change the outcome. And I think there's no doubt that it has to have an effect. What do you think about that?
It's a really important consideration, and it's so important. Um, and it is so little thought about, or not thought about in a central way in the research. And so, what your story reminds me of, a friend of mine, Santosh Helekar. He's presented at the Science of Consciousness conferences for 2 or 3 years now about a new consciousness measurement effect that he has found through a simple kind of experiment. It's a kind of experiment like uh, light diffraction, kind of like what Dean Radin does with double slit measurements in a very simple way, where he puts this device near a conscious being, like a person or an animal, and he can see an effect. And it's got to be something beyond currently known accepted physics. If it's real and it seems to be an actual effect, and he comes from a kind of conventional minded. He's a medical doctor, and has developed standard conventional kind of medical devices before, and he was presenting at the Tucson Science of Consciousness and talking about all the different measurements where he shows that there's a robust effect. You put this device near a conscious being, and then he said, and then we decided to cut the head off the mouse, and
Boy.
and that's all like this. No, and yeah, a lot of people in the audience reacted with the same like, well, you should think more carefully before you do that kind of thing. And of course, indigenous cultures have always thought that way, and it's something that that kind of consciousness that we really should bring to our medical scientific enterprise a lot more.
Yeah, I totally agree. And where do you see your research going, Thomas, as far as consciousness? What's the outcome that we all want to uncover? Because all of us are so interested and so passionate and so inspired by all of this work. What's the end goal of all of this research that everyone's doing?
Well, I think there is actually going on now a kind of revolution in science. A next scientific revolution is actually happening, and it's going to be a revolution that brings consciousness into our scientific models of how reality works for the first time. And that revolution will revolutionize a lot of things. So I see that that revolution is really where it's going. And you have to be careful when you talk about revolutions because people get concerned about we don't want to do violence to the past outgoing paradigm. We want to just transcend it and envelop it into a new paradigm, kind of like how the quantum revolution in physics that happened 100 years ago today, basically, uh, really went beyond classical physics, transcended it, found this entirely new category of phenomena called quantum phenomena that is now the foundation of all of physics, but then re-included the classical physics as the limiting cases of the quantum world. So it didn't completely overthrow classical physical paradigm, but it definitely transcended it into a new paradigm. And so we're having we're undergoing a similar process now. And these kinds of paradigms shifts, they tend to happen largely in stealth mode, like it is happening. And these perspectives are changing. And then collectively, there's a kind of a sudden shift, I think. We'll see. But there's kind of a sudden shift where everybody wakes up one day and say, oh, yeah, we always thought that way. And then it's done. We're in the new paradigm.
Exactly. No, and I hope, I believe that that day is getting closer. Yeah, especially as we understand consciousness more, and as we move away from our patterns and habits that we've been taught to believe, and that communication is more open and honest. That maybe we'll uncover and truly understand the fundamental nature of reality. But we're getting there.
Yeah. Yes, and the applications, when it becomes obviously applicable, clearly applicable, that will that will really accelerate the shift to new paradigm when the applicability really becomes clear. But one thing we have to remember, though, is that the applications, they will be a new category of applications. They won't be just like uh, just versions of old type of applications. Like like uh, we used to think if we could just make a psychic garage door opener, then everybody would see that it works, and and that would shift the paradigm. But that's not really an entirely new category of application. That's just we have good enough garage door openers. So this the application of truly bringing consciousness into our scientific and technological models of reality and applications will be entirely new categories of applications and profoundly changing, and if we manage it right, in a good way. But they won't be old types of applications that work perfectly well in the classical model.
Yeah, that's really well put. I don't want to learn how to drive a car with my mind. I want to learn how to bilocate my body. Like that sounds way better and much more efficient. So let's bring it down from 5D down to kind of 3D. Can you tell us more about the study that IONS applied for the grant from InnerScience last year, and we funded it? It's actually going on right now. I think we're in the second round right now. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about that study?
Yeah, Helane Wabe is our director of research at IONS, is the PI in that study, and Arnaud Delorme is also involved, and Cedric, who's a fellow now, science fellow at times, are involved, and it's it's a really good study in that it it will offer unique insights in a carefully controlled way to the effectiveness and impacts of different types of meditation, in a controlled research manner. And the citizen science aspect is really important. And it has a very ambitious goal of a huge number of participants, citizen science participants. Um, uh, and so that in itself will bring visibility, that participation, and impact to the field of the positive impact of meditation in the world. So that citizen science aspect is a huge part of it, and the asking these questions in a particular way, and then getting large amounts of data to answer those questions about the different types of meditation and their efficaciousness are really key to that study. And the really ambitious number of participants uh, has uh, uh, we've gotten a huge number of participants, but we're a little bit behind in the number. So we have extended the timeline a little bit, and I think uh, you guys have helped recently by putting out the word to push to point potential participants to the project. So it is moving along, and we're looking forward to the first reports after we get all those data in.
Yeah, it's so nice that we can collaborate with like-minded people that want to uncover what consciousness is all about. And in a world right now where there's a lot of not good stuff happening out in the world, it's a great time to close your eyes, go within, and get familiar with yourself. And that's where the true power comes in and where consciousness is. And it's fun that we're doing this together as a group of individuals that care about where we're going in the future. And I know our Catalyst community cares a lot, and their hearts are big and their minds are open. And it's just lovely to talk to you, Thomas, and learn more about ions and where we're going with all of this research.
Yeah, but before we let you go, I want to ask at least one more question, which
For
is,
sure.
yeah,
At least one.
let's go deep. Let's see. What is
Yes.
it that you don't tell people that you're holding back, that you've seen or you've experienced? I'm willing to share a story, but I want to hear what your wildest story is, that of what you've witnessed or experienced.
Well, so I could say that I have experience. So like I've been saying in this interview, that we're creating the theoretical ontological foundations, or identifying the ontological foundations for how scientific community can understand how consciousness affects the physical world. Um, uh, and that's a sort of gradualistic approach. It is an approach. It is bringing in an entirely new paradigm, but it's a sort of a gradualistic approach. Like I really like Roger Penrose's approach to identifying the collapse of quantum wave function as the sort of the opening in the physical structure of the universe. And then that opens up the possibility of non-local phenomena generally, and consciousness in connection with others. So that said, given the question you asked, though, Andrew, uh, there are category of phenomena that are really out there that aren't explainable in that kind of gradualistic approach, and they're really out there. So I can say that experience of those kind of out there things are also in my pantheon of experience in my life. And so I can give a sort of categorical answer to that in that way. I don't have a specific really wild experience to share right now, but that whole category is something I can.
Which book that you've written, because it sounds like you've written several, which book would you recommend we read if we wanted to get a little bit of insight into that question, that the answers, that where do you reveal some of those things?
Well, actually, in my first book, the Mechanism, Demands of Mysticism, I share some of those things from a personal experiential perspective. And so I do share some of those experiences in that book, The Mechanism, Demands of Mysticism. Um, Subtitle, An Exploration of Spirit, Matter, and Physics. That title, Mechanism, Demands of Mysticism, I actually got from a quote from one of the founders of quantum physics, Louis de Broglie, who got the Nobel Prize for talking about the wave nature of matter.
And you know how I got introduced to noetic sciences is through Dan Brown's books, that he brings up noetic sciences in probably 2 or 3 of his books. And I love that he brought awareness back in the early 90s to what you guys are all about, because a lot of his books entertain the mystical and the symbolism and all of those fun things.
Yeah,
Did he ask permission from Noetic Sciences to put you guys in his books?
well, that's really interesting because he's got another book coming out in September, and
Yeah, I
yeah,
know it's on. I'm ready for it.
in his book, the Lost Symbol, I think it was one of his best-selling books. He mentions ions instead of Noetic Sciences by name, and no, at that time, Ions did not know that he was going to do that. So when the book
Wow.
came out, Ions leaders were taken by surprise, and they asked for television interviews about the book, and they didn't even know they were in there. But this one that's coming out in September by Dan Brown, his new book, he has let Dean know that Ions is mentioned by name again in this new book,
Wow.
and he won't let us know much else about the book, but he did let us know that we're a character as an
I
institution
love
in the
that.
book.
And do
And
you know who's going
so,
to play you in the movie?
well, Dean is really more of the character in Dan Brown's book. Dean is a friend of Dan Brown's, and
Really?
yeah,
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, Dan Brown kind of opened the door for the supernatural and to see things a little bit differently than what history has told us. So I think that's kind of cool that people are attracted to this. It just shows you how much, you know, the general public is interested in the supernatural.
Yeah, and the lost symbol. What I like about that, I was rereading it now because of his new book coming out that mentions ions. What I like about that, one of the things is it talks about stuff that's in plain sight, a reinterpretation of things that are in plain sight, like the Masonic sites in Washington D.C. and that kind of thing. And that's kind of what I did in my work with Robert Duvall and about the ancient megalithic site Nabta Playa, and the Egyptian ancient sites. Is some of these things are there in plain sight. And even in science today, some of these new paradigm effects, they're there in plain sight, like we've talked about. And it's really just a new way of thinking about and realizing these things that are happening around us. That is one of the key approaches to developing the revolutionary new paradigm.
Yeah, I love it. We were just in DC and I got a tour of the Capitol. And in that rotunda, I had a couple pages from the lost symbol that I read before I went in there to see all of that. So you're right, it is in plain sight.
Yeah, and one of my colleagues went to the museum, the Masonic Museum there, and sent me all these photos that just brought back a lot of memories. And I told him, I said, these symbols, it's a symbol of what we're studying, what we're practicing, what we now know that's been forgotten or only known by the occult or secret societies and things like that. It's becoming more common knowledge.
Yeah.
So it's all very exciting.
Yeah. We just this May we held our IONS board meeting in Washington D.C. because we had some meetings there, and on the Saturday after that Masonic temple in D.C. is really a beautiful, amazing temple. Claudia, the board chair of IONS, she got in contact with the head of that temple, and he opened it up for us on a weekend when it was closed and gave us a private tour, which was really wonderful. And about the 33rd degree Masons and that kind of thing.
Wow, I am so grateful to have had Dr. Thomas Brophy from IONS on our podcast. It's so amazing.
What a sweet man, and what an amazing adventure he's a part of, and all of the things that he's doing in research is just mind-blowing.
All the different rabbit holes that we went down make me think about all the different people that we could have on our podcast. Just keep talking about consciousness and science and psi phenomenon, all of the above.
And did you see how he lit up when they talked about Dan Brown and how Noetic Science is in his latest book, which is Secret of Secrets? He just loved that. And it's so cool that that book now is going to be mainstream. And it is mainstream. He's a best-selling author. And my goodness, I just think it's really cool that the information is getting out all about consciousness and how it affects our lives.
Absolutely. The general public is finding out that there's so much more to the world than just what we see with our eyes. There's more magic, there's more mystical, there's more spirituality, and it's all right there. And I love that science is looking at that now and trying to explain what's actually happening.
Yeah, and he's been a part of this for such a long time. Before he even went and started working with IONS, he's written many books, which he mentioned, and the fact that he was in Egypt and was studying like what was going on with the pyramids, and he has so much depth to him.
Exactly. The citizen science that they're doing, Helene is the lead researcher on that one. Just an amazing story, and I'm sure their research should be out very soon. They finished it up this year, and we're very excited to see a paper come out of that. First, of course, they have to write the manuscript and submit it for publication, but we'll make sure that when it's available, you can all see it. It's very exciting.
Yeah, and I love that InnerScience is really reaching out to different organizations, and we're funding, different things about consciousness and meditation, and we want to know how this all works, and I think it's really cool. We're going in different directions and working with the coolest people.
Yeah, totally. I love also when he was talking about cold fusion, or actually room temperature fusion, that consciousness actually affects that. And it makes sense because cold fusion, I mean, it was attempted, or I don't know if it was attempted or successful, but maybe debunked years ago. But the reason it's been so hard to reproduce is because of the effects of consciousness and the effects of the attitudes and the beliefs of the researchers who are trying to do it. So who knows, maybe free energy is right around the corner.
Yeah, this is so cool. I think we're just at the very beginning stages of knowing so much more.
I'm so grateful to be on this journey and to be doing this with you, Hillary, and with InnerScience Research Fund. We are a nonprofit organization, and we are dedicated to funding groundbreaking research on the physiological and biological effects of meditation on the human body.
Yeah, we explore human transformation, consciousness, and the science of meditation in order to empower people to heal and thrive. We are a mission-driven community shifting the paradigm of healthcare together.
And if you'd like to join our mission as a catalyst for change, please check out our website, innerscienceresearch.org. If you'd like to find out more information about Dr. Joe's retreats, go to drjoedispenza.com. And to learn something more about ions, go to noetic.org. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll see you in the field.